We'll begin here. Qatar's Prime Minister will later today address the United Nations Security Council that is currently mulling a joint statement that would express deep concern regarding the recent Israeli strikes targeting Hamas in Doha. The council meeting was delayed by 24 hours to allow Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Thani time to travel to New York to participate in the emergency session in person. Let's get more details now. We speak to UN correspondent Shaun Brass-Pease, who's tracking the developments for us ahead of that meeting. Shaun, good evening to you and thank you so much for your time. So we understand the council has been negotiating a joint statement on the Israeli strike that would require agreement from all 15 members to be issued as a document of the council. Now, given the well-known dynamics in the council when it comes to the Israeli-Palestine file, what might we expect in the hours ahead?
Bongewe, I'm going to read that statement for you in a moment, a draft statement at this point. There is a mechanism called placing a statement, a draft statement or a draft resolution under a silence procedure. So essentially, once the 15 members of the United Nations Security Council have negotiated a text, it goes under a silence procedure. And if that silence procedure passes without objection, it will then be issued as a statement or a document of the UN Security Council. That silence procedure was due to expire at 7 p.m. at this hour, South African time. We've just been told by one of the drafters of that statement that that silence procedure has now been extended by 30 minutes until 7:30. So by 7:30 tonight, we'll be able to know whether this actually becomes a collective statement of the council. Let me quickly read that for you. The members of the Security Council expressed their deep concern regarding the recent strikes in Doha, the territory of a key mediator, on the 9th of September. They expressed deep regret at the loss of civilian life. Council members underscored the importance of de-escalation and expressed their solidarity with Qatar. They underlined their support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Qatar in line with the principles of the UN Charter. Council members recalled their support for the vital role that Qatar plays in mediation efforts in the region alongside Egypt and the United States. Council members underscored that releasing the hostages, including those killed by Hamas, and ending the war and suffering in Gaza must remain our top priority. In this regard, they reiterated the importance of the ongoing diplomatic efforts of Qatar, Egypt, and the United States, and called for parties to seize this opportunity for peace. So in terms of the choreography in this meeting, right? Who will we be closely watching here? Of course, the Qatari Prime Minister, who has traveled to New York. We'll be very interested to hear his statement in terms of choreographing an international response to what they believe was a treacherous act by the Israelis in terms of violating their sovereignty. Also of interest will be to see the US ambassador. Right, the Trump administration was not given advance notice of the Israeli strike. In fact, it was the US military that informed the White House of the impending attack by the Israelis on Doha. And of course, then they sought to inform the Qataris about the attack, but the attack was already underway. So we understand that President Trump had a heated conversation with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about this. So it will be interesting to watch the US envoy to see if there will be some level of criticism directed at the Israelis, given that, you know, they are historically a very close ally and very protective of Israel in the council. And then, of course, you know, will you hear any contrition from the Israeli ambassador? I'll tell you, Danny Danon has put out two statements ahead of this meeting. He said this just this week: there will be no impunity for terrorists, not in Gaza, Lebanon, or in Qatar. The Algerian ambassador, the Algerians called for this meeting, chooses to cooperate with Hamas and provide them with legitimacy from within the Security Council. Israel will continue to act decisively against the leaders of terror. A subsequent statement, he says, Israel's action was not intended to target the state of Qatar. The goal was and will remain clear: to strike Hamas terrorists and those responsible for the massacres of October 7th. Israel has no tolerance and will have no tolerance for Hamas terrorist leaders wherever they are hiding. And it's also, in terms of the broader context, Bongewe, to understand, Israel has not only struck in Gaza, they've struck in Syria, they've struck in Lebanon, they've struck in Yemen, they've struck in Iran, and now Qatar. So it's going to be very interesting to see if Israel will be increasingly isolated when this Security Council meets later this afternoon here.
Interesting indeed, Sharon. And speaking about choreography, right, we also understand that Qatar will host an emergency summit of Arab and Islamic states in Doha. This is on Sunday. But one would ask, what could emerge from a meeting of that nature, given the widespread condemnation of Israel by several Middle Eastern countries, especially in addition to the wider international community?
Yeah, I mean, listen to what the Qatari Prime Minister said in an interview with our colleagues at CNN earlier today. He said there must be a collective response from the region. The response is currently under consultation and discussion with our partners in the region. And he warned that the entire Gulf region was at risk. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, said this in a statement earlier this week: the attack requires an Arab, Islamic and international response to confront such aggression and to take international measures to stop the occupying power and deter its criminal practices aimed at destabilizing the security and stability of the region. So what you are hearing from leaders in the region is that they are working on a response. One imagines that the summit in Doha on Sunday will better inform us in terms of how we move forward here, in terms of that response. What could that response look like? What will the role of the United States be in terms of that response, right? The United States is a very close ally of the Qataris. Qatar hosts a military base in its country to the tune of some 10,000 troops and personnel. And so there is a very close relationship between Doha and Washington. And so what that response looks like, right? In the absence of a Security Council resolution, you saw that tepid, rather weak language, no condemnation. Israel's name is not even mentioned in that draft statement. So, the intention here from Middle Eastern countries appears to be, we'll come to the UN Security Council and brief you, but we're also going to discuss in our own formula, in our own fora, what that response, that collective response is going to look like. And one imagines that given Israel's violation of, a sacrosanct tenet here of the United Nations Charter, one of the pillars is a nation's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. What that response might look like, given the broad condemnation we have seen from the international community, including the United Nations Security Council, including European countries, African countries, and the Middle East writ large. What that response looks like, I think you will get greater indication from the Qatari Prime Minister in the Council today, but again, when those Islamic and Arab countries meet on Sunday in Doha.
Interesting developments there, Sharon. Let's see then what happens in the hours and days ahead. Thank you so much for that comprehensive update there. My colleague Sharon Bryce-Peace live for us in New York.